Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Tonight, Jack Hart returns to the show to continue our discussion on his very popular Black Sun Rising series, which is running on Veterans Today. In the series, Jack lays out his case to expose the hidden or occulted history of humanity and the planet. Back early this year on two previous shows, Jack covered parts 1 through 4 with us, and so tonight we pick up with parts 5 and 6, and finish with what Jack refers to as Part 6.6, Return of the Titans, which is his most recent article. After we discuss 5 and 6, I will come back and take a brief moment to give the audience some key background information on the 6.6 segment to help everyone follow along. Jack's research will be deemed by some to be controversial. However, as many of us know, we need to free think the esoteric because truth is indeed stranger than fiction. Here's Jack Hart.
Welcome back to the show, and the last time we had you here, I think it was back in April, we covered Black Sun Rising parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, and today we're going to get into parts 5, 6, and 6.6. So welcome back.
Thank you, Michael. It's been a fun ride. It was April we did the last interview? I can't remember.
I think it was April.
Snow on the ground, but maybe I'm wrong. Let's start with 5. I'll put it up on the computer right now.
I did it the old-fashioned way. I printed it out.
You printed it out? Yeah, I don't print it out. I don't want to waste paper. Okay, I started with 5 and then went into the Montauk projects a bit, which is what probably got me into writing all this stuff. I had an acquaintance with Preston Nichols from 92 to 95. My first impression of him was he was just a flake. Then I started checking things out, and what he was saying was true, and it also coincided with things in my life. My father was stationed at Camp Hero during the Korean War. I had worked at Montauk all through my childhood, and I began to see that a lot of what he was saying was true. He had a very large following, by the way. It actually influenced John Ford, who was head of MUFON on Long Island, to go after John Powell and the Brookhaven Party, and they tried to poison them with plutonium by planting it in their cars and in their living space. In any case, they caught him and they sent him to jail for the rest of his life for it. But they were working off of what Preston Nichols had been saying.
I've always wondered whether he was the real deal or...
Oh, yeah, he was the real deal, Michael, because I could tell you stories about... Okay, my wife was... she was doing this thing where, like, everybody would go to the Best Western Hotel. It was over in Patchogue. It was a really nice hotel over on Sunrise Highway. A lot of the housewives in the complex I was living in at the time in Patchogue were doing it. They would get $50. They would show up at the conference room there. They would put on earphones and they would be subjected to different music and soundtracks and stuff. And they would just have to press a button right in front of them, whether they liked it or express what they were feeling towards it. So one day, she was late coming home. It was right down the block, so I went down there to see where she was. And who was giving this little show and standing at the podium with Preston Nichols? He was deeply involved with the Brookhaven Lab, and who he represents himself as is not what he is. I said that in one of the comments, I think, on 6.6. He tries to represent himself as totally harmless, just this bumbling little fat guy. No, this guy is a trained spy, psyop, whatever you want to call him, and he's in it up to his neck. And if anybody who doubts me, I ask them to just Google cell phone and Charlie Chaplin, and they will see Preston Nichols. He's the guy standing in front of the zebra talking on the cell phone in a 1920s movie.
What exactly is going on in Brookhaven Labs? I never really understood that. I heard a lot of things.
Nobody does, Michael. We have the highest rate of cancer on Long Island. They insist that they don't have particle accelerators. I've been told they have 2 of them that are subterranean, deep underground bases, whatever you want to call them. And judging by the cancer rates on Long Island, they definitely do. Now, we can go right into what I said about Schauberger.
We're talking about Victor Schauberger, right?
Yes, Victor Schauberger, right.
Okay.
When Schauberger was an old man, he was like 72 years old. He was suffering from emphysema. He had a heart condition, too. He was talked into coming here by a German national who would come over, and he had formed an allegiance with a Texas billionaire. Now, they gave him all kinds of stories about fame and fortune, and they were finally going to release his patents. It was a consortium. It was called Donner Gersheimer. They actually flew him over from Austria. They got him here. They confused the hell out of him. He met with personnel from the Brookhaven lab, supposedly to assess the feasibility of his ideas, but they already knew they were feasible because these guys were already experts on what we were calling vortex technology. What they did is they had him sign a bunch of documents turning over to them everything that he ever did on his vortex technology. They put him on a plane back, and he was already a broken man, and he lived 5 days after he got back to Austria and died. That essentially signed over to the Brookhaven Lab and Gersheimer Consortium everything Schauberger ever did, which is why you cannot get your hands on any of his papers anymore. Anybody who has any doubts that Schauberger was doing what he was doing, there was a lot of witnesses. And just the fact that this whole trip to this consortium in Dallas and to the Brookhaven Lab is documentation enough to tell you that something was going on.
Well, and Victor Schauberger, he wanted a better world for mankind. He was working on stuff that was going to make the world a better place. So are you saying, Jack, that Schauberger's work, which was essentially stolen, made its way over to Brookhaven Labs?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay.
Maybe I took a roundabout way, but I was trying to use names and dates. But anybody who wants the names, places, and dates can look on the bottom of 5. It's all there, a full account of it. This guy he's like a tragic figure in history. He actually, when the National Socialists took over in Germany, Hitler had a meeting with him almost immediately. He was one of the most famous scientists in the world already. His ideas, they were different, to say the least, but he wanted a world based on the technology that worked in accordance with nature, not against it. So he had scheduled for like a half-hour, an hour-long meeting with Hitler, and Max Planck was there. He's the father of quantum physics.
Right.
So him, Hitler, and Planck met. The meeting went on for hours. It went way over time, and everybody wanted to see Hitler at the time, but, they would just put off while they talked. And he told Hitler that, the Third Reich that's going to last 1,000 years is not going to last but 10 years with the way you're doing things. And he wanted to change everything around. And Hitler was a mystic. He was a trained mystic. He was enthralled. But Planck, who was a rigid scientist, he was not so enthralled. And he ended up scoffing at him and telling Schauberger that nature has nothing to do with science. They're two different things, and the meeting sort of ended like that. And for years, for the next 8 years, Schauberger more or less worked in obscurity. He financed himself until finally he was approached by those terrible SS guys, and they told him that Hinkle had been stealing his patents. And they told him to put his wallet away because he was looking to patent his repulsator. They told him that he was now working for them, and he had carte blanche. And there's sporadic documentation about where he was, who he saw. He sooner or later culminated with 5 machines they wanted him to build because he had made a lot of the demo type stuff, small stuff. He had made an actual propulsor that supposedly shot up into the ceiling of the hangar it was in and blew itself apart. But they had asked him to stop tinkering around with demonstration models, and they wanted the real thing.
Yeah.
They asked him to build 5 different types of machines. These machines were a machine for biosynthesizing hydrogen fuel from water, another that naturally produced intense heat or cold. 5th was dubbed the Fliegerschreib, or flying saucer. There was a water purifier and an energy device capable of generating high voltage electricity.
So he was into really free energy production. Was he? My understanding, Jack, reading your article, is that he was using the ether.
What he did was he used a process called condensing. He was watching a trout one day in the stream, and we've all seen this, and I often wondered about it myself. I'm a fisherman myself. They can sit in water that's doing 10 miles an hour, and they just seem to sit there, and it's behind the rock, it's out of the current. Put your hand in the back of that rock and see if it's out of the current. And the fish just manages to suspend itself in the water. And he reasoned to himself that the fish he knew it wasn't using kinetic energy. He reasoned to himself that it was using another kind of energy, which he labeled as condensing. It had been discussed before by Einstein and a few other scientists. It involves freezing atoms to absolute zero, and they coalesce into another type of material that's actually capable of producing energy on a mass scale, and it can be measured. It can be measured as a wave. And this is called condensing. It wasn't actually proved until 1995 by the NIST. He called it vortex technology. The trout technology was a euphemism they used for it. But this is the basis for the energy and how he was getting the energy. He reasoned also to himself, the reason he called it vortex technology, is he looked at the stars, like if you see a galaxy and stuff, it seems to swirl.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you see energy, whirlpools and stuff like that, it always goes in a vortex. And he reasoned to himself that was the way nature released energy. That's why he called it vortex technology. This was clean energy. There was no splitting of atoms, no nuclear pollution. And they developed this. I mean, I've been researching this now for almost a year. There's footprints all over the place. And gradually, as I've been writing this, I've watched it start to come out on TV and stuff. First of all, people are seeing, was there 1 million sightings a year now of flying saucers? Does anybody still believe that they're hallucinating? They're seeing swamp gas? That these things don't exist? Are you sure the Pacific Ocean exists if you didn't see it? I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's idiotic with the debunkers. The things are there. You know, how did they get there? Is it little green men from Mars? Maybe. I don't know. What I'm starting to read now is maybe there are aliens. I never believed in them before, to tell you the truth, and I think I've told you that.
Yeah.
But certainly, man has a technology that he's not talking about.
I want to ask about that repulsator that Schauberger was working on, or that he actually did work on. So that was a levitation device, right? Do we call that anti-gravity today?
Anti-gravity, right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Now, Gordon Duff did a whole series. He called it Disclosure. Gordon Duff is the director for Adamus Defense Corporation, which is a company so shrouded in mystery. I mean, it actually induces panic in people that know a little bit about it. It's one of the larger defense contracting companies. And he actually outlined just how anti-gravity works. I don't know if you're familiar with the Aurora.
Yes. It's
supposedly a theoretical plane that everybody knows exists that can do, I think it's, 30,000 miles an hour or something. It's responsible for these contrails you see that seem to go like little puffs in the sky. And
you're talking about the triangular, correct?
Yeah, right. Well, they're calling it the Aurora. That's what Nick Cook called it when he wrote Hunt for Zero-Point Gravity. He's a writer for Jane's Defense. And a lot of people that are in the know in the defense industry are just referring to it as the Aurora. It's the next generation plane. It's after stealth technology. It's probably what everybody's seeing with these flying Vs and stuff that are seen every day by people all over. I mean, there's mass sightings in. Recently there was one, I believe it was in the Netherlands, where everybody was seeing these things for a few weeks.
Well, I can tell you that you said before about UFOs and people seeing these things. I have two examples. I have a friend of mine who is of sound mind, and she had told me that above her house, hovering above her house, not way up in the sky, I mean, it wasn't like right on top of her house, but she looked up, it was early evening, and the triangular craft was hovering silently directly above her property.
I have a couple of friends that have told me the same thing.
Same thing, right?
Yeah.
And then
I've never seen one myself, but these people aren't the types to make up stories.
No, this person...
Open yourself up to ridicule like that anyway.
Yeah, this person's the same thing. She's really just a real good person. And myself, going back, Jack, I guess maybe about 7 or 8 months ago, I happened to step out with my dog on my deck around 2:30 in the morning, and I looked up to the east, and there was a luminous, glowing orb, about an orange type of color. And it would move, and then it would stop. It was clearly not an airplane because of the pattern. I mean, the way it was moving in the sky. And it clearly wasn't a star or whatever it may be because of the color. And I must have watched it for a good 15, 20 minutes until it finally disappeared. So
I think if we look up at the sky, there's stuff up there that if you look at it long enough, if you look at the sky long enough, you're going to see something that you can't explain.
Yeah.
Using Cartesian reality. Because I'll tell you what, Cartesian reality doesn't exist. I printed out a link on my latest Black Sun Rising piece. It's link 11, and it's in the sources. It's a list of maybe 120 advanced scientific papers on the unified field theory. Every one of them begins by ridiculing Einstein's theories. And yet, I still see Morgan Freeman on TV espouting this, and all the other, it's infuriating to me. It really is. Because I know, but this is not the technology they're using. It's like they've given people, regular people, a box of crayons and told them to go color in the corner. And they've monopolized this technology for themselves.
Yeah.
I know the philosophy behind that is we've overrun the earth with people. I mean, there's a lot of idiocy in the world. I think they shudder at sharing this. I mean, imagine increasing everybody's life expectancies at 10,000 years or something. What would happen to this planet? You know, it's that Malthusian thing. This is what goes through their heads. The ignorance, the religious intolerance, this is not the way they think. But they can look at themselves and blame themselves. They've allowed the Pope to go on and on. They've allowed the rabbis to go on and on. They've allowed the imams to go on. And there should have been a stop put to these people a long time. Somebody should have stuffed a sock in their mouths and threw them in the closet. Yet we still have this worship of death, these death cults. Abrahamic religions, they're all death cults. That's really what they are. They're myopic. They worship death. And then they want to make more and more and more children. I would urge people to look at what they're seeing. Like everybody wants to talk about a breakaway civilization and why don't they share it? That's why they don't share it. They have their reasons. Damn good reasons, though.
Yep, I agree. And so, Jack, the whole premise behind your Black Sun Rising series is really to call out the fact that there is this occult understanding, occult knowledge, which has led to...
I'm glad you brought that up, Michael.
Yep.
These people, they never bought into these Abrahamic religions. I mean, basically, everything's migrated out from Babylon. Well, the Jews are the only ones that really got it right, but they don't tell everybody, even in the Jewish religion. It's all in the Kabbalah. They have never bought into this Jesus is going to save me, or I don't know what the Muslims are doing. Muhammad loved women.
Well, it's interesting because you're on a theme that, and I don't want to jump ahead here, but I just wanted to interject because in part 6, you wrote about the goddess Ishtar.
Right.
And she explained very clearly what's going on. She talked about the green world.
Right, the green world.
That man's physical body is nothing but a temporal home. She talks about all of this down here has been created by a dark god.
Right, an evil god. Science, when you get down to it, human beings are nothing but a mass of photons, and they're a charge. They're an electrical charge. Your body is just a vehicle in which it's carried in. Actually, so scientists did experiments in the early 20th century and came up that the body loses 21 grams upon its death.
Yeah.
So the soul actually does weigh 21 grams, and those experiments, strangely enough, have never been repeated. Why not? The absolute certainty of knowledge just being put in a closet and being avoided, like when you get into the hollow earth theories and stuff like that. It's just some things are just anathema, and there's talking points. It's like just the same thing they do with the news. You're given a talking point, and you can't go out of that curriculum. You have to stick to that talking point. What truly is resonance fields. 96% of the world around us consists of resonance fields.
Yeah.
That's what those papers are all about.
What really gets me, it's really mind-numbing when you think about it, Jack, is when you take a look at how much time and energy and money has been spent to keep the real technology, the real knowledge away from the masses. It is absolutely staggering.
No expense is spared, Michael.
Staggering.
No expense is spared. They'll kill anybody. They'll ruin anybody. There's no rule book. That's been thrown out the window. And you have people like Wikipedia. You have the media, which is controlled, as we all know, by only...
Oh, you have National Geographic, you have the Discovery Channel, you have the History Channel.
It's owned by the Grosvenors, who are the richest family in England. Their cousins own the Smithsonian. I mean, as soon as any find is made, they show up with a team of crack debunkers, and they start burying things and depositing them in the basements of vaults unknown in museums. And then they'll make a program with, it was a kite cult. They were worshiping kites, like with the Nazca Lions. They worship seashells. I mean, just demented stuff. It makes no sense. You know, maybe they're right about people being so stupid they're not ready for this. If they buy into some of the things that National Geographic and the Smithsonian say, and this is being taught in the halls of academia as knowledge, and a thinking person is buying into this. You know, if I was sitting in the classroom, I would be questioning that professor that was espouting this. He'd be sweating bullets. But they just buy right into it, you know.
Well, that's the part. That's the part that's staggering about it. You have people in academia, you have these professors. Now, some people would say they know better and they're just teaching the propaganda. My position is that I think they just believe the propaganda.
I agree with you, Michael. They do.
So even the people who are supposed to be the experts and really smart and everything else, even they are so adrift. They're so far from the mothership.
Michael, that burns me up so much when they present these people on our boob tool. They're an expert. An expert on what? You know, I know a lot about archaeology, okay, and anthropology. And the people they present as experts, I couldn't even have a conversation with them. To me, I look at them like they're 7-year-old children. They know nothing about archaeology. I mean, like I said in the first part of Behind the Bush, pick up forbidden archaeology. Everything they say has been debunked 1,000 times over. There's all kinds of evidence saying that, no, this is not what happened. They picked and chose and presented only the facts that benefited their theories. And then they ignore everything else. And if anybody dares to say any different, they're crazy. They're a quack. Okay, now you make a TV show. Right. You call yourself National Geographic or the Smithsonian. You're accepted. You're supposed to be a standard, okay? And now you just presented a moron as an expert. Really. And now a kid is listening to this. It's a gradual inculcation into stupidity, into permanent slavery. That should be the opening theme song when these shows come on. Welcome to eternal slavery, you know? Maybe we could have like a Metallica type band. Selma Hayek and From Dusk Till Dawn, you know?
Well, maybe the tales of Ishtar saying that all this will be rectified in the next age.
Rectified now, Michael. It's being rectified now.
I'm hoping. It's even, and we'll move on here to part 6 in a minute, though, but you were talking about archaeology and all this stuff, and I just wanted to put in there, it's even the whole thing with the pyramids where they're saying the pyramids are tombs, not tombs.
Right. That guy, Z.Y. Howey.
Yeah.
I just want to reach through the TV set and pull his tongue right out of his head every time I can't even look at him without frothing at the mouth, I'll tell you. I remember when they presented him to the world. Instead of debating Graham Hancock or David Childress or somebody like that, who does he debate? A psychic from the Edgar Cayce Foundation. Really? You can't, like Jim Dean says, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, go back through the archives and see when Dr. Z.I. Howey was first introduced to the world. He debated a psychic, and it wasn't even a first-rate psychic from the Edgar Cayce Foundation on what the pyramids were. And now with the Bosnian pyramids, the guy who found them, I hope he gets together one of those armies that are roaming around the Ukraine and prevents them from getting within 20 miles of that find, or they'll do what they tried to do, or they're doing successfully at Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, yeah,
which is building a plywood canopy over the whole thing.
Yeah, that's
and not letting anybody in to even see it. Yeah.
That's a travesty. That's unbelievable.
I think the guy that's got the pyramids in Bosnia, I think he's got it under control, but because over there, it's the rule of the gun, and he's probably got his own little following there. Well, because they ain't gotten close to that place, you know? All they can do is throw rocks from 20 miles away at them, you know. Oh, it's not a pyramid, it's not a... And meanwhile, he's showing you bricks and stuff. It's not a pyramid. What is it? It's a natural form. Everything's a natural formation to these guys, you know?
And they've actually been able to measure the energy.
Right,
the intensity of the energy within that pyramid.
The water runs through the course. It acts like a giant transceiver. It actually sends signals out into outer space.
Well, it's the same thing. It's the same construct they have with the pyramids in Giza. The same thing.
Right.
Yep.
Right, you were telling me that.
Yep.
Right.
So, what I wanted to do, Jack, is that now we're going to maybe segue into, because it's just the perfect moment to segue into part 6, where you start talking about the Thule Society and Vril.
Oh, the Thule Society.
And we start to really get into some of the more esoteric and the occulted types of stuff. So what did you want to tell us about part 6?
The Thule Society. I'm glad you brought them up. Where do we start with the Thule Society? Who were they? Nobody really knows, but I would hazard a guess they were an offshoot of the Bavarian Illuminati. They constructed the Nazi Party. They trained Hitler. They taught him how to speak, how to conjure, how to present themselves. Then they introduced them as party member 555. And we will be getting into 555 too, because somebody wrote a book about, and he talks about 555. There's somebody named Aleister Crowley that we don't want to really talk about yet. But he was at the bottom of the Thule Society. Also, you had the Vril Society. They came from the a thing called Ordo Bucentoro. That is what the Black Madonna and the swastika is mostly about. They became active again in the early part of the 21st century. They're a 500-year-old order that started in Venice. They worship the goddess. They've been trained and schooled in magic, supposedly maybe out of Sumeria itself. They have a website, comes from out of Italy, but traced it comes from out of Germany. There's a lot of switching off, because in Germany a lot of what they're saying is illegal.
So you're talking about there's a current day Vril society?
Yeah, yes, that's what I'm telling you. Yeah.
Okay, because I was thinking going back to Maria Orsic, but you're saying there's a current.
They disappeared. Maria Orsic and the followers all disappeared at the end of World War II. They made a prophecy too that they would reappear in 1992 and 93, or I think it was 2004, 2003. But in any case, the dates coincide exactly with Preston Nichols and his writing of the Montauk Projects in the early 90s, and then the reappearance of this Vril Society. I have the link to it. I have to warn people that they'll have to run it through a Google translator because it's all in German. They're called CausaNostra.com.
So Cosa Nostra is the new Vril?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it. All right.
It's all women. Extremely beautiful women. They have hair down below their hips, and because they believe that the hair is used for channel. They're extremely wealthy, most of them, too, from what I see. If you go through the site, you see pictures of Maseratis, Porsches, villas, and castles, and actually Putin's in their pictures, too. I think they're trying to say that he's a member.
They played a very, very important part going back to National Socialists, right? Their channeling was...
They were doing automatic writing. They translated it to an ancient type of Sumerian. It's about 4,000 to 5,000 years old. The Germans had the best scholars.
And they had to translate that.
They translated it, and they found out it really was Sumerian, that these girls were just writing. They didn't have the educations to do this on papers. Now, they were picked up by none other than Schumann, of the Schumann Resonance. And he started drawing up plans, because it was plans for a vehicle that could transverse the ether, go through time and space.
The leader of the Vril was, I mentioned before, Maria Orsic.
Right.
And so what was happening was they were channeling, and they were doing automatic writing, and that automatic writing, they were writing in ancient Sumerian.
Yes.
And the scholars had to translate the ancient Sumerian into German, and then when they did this, what transpired was, I guess, the schematic for a flying disc. Right. There was actually, I think they had patents on it and stuff, and when Schumann was working on it, he was working directly for the German government. Right.
That's traceable, even. Now, I don't think they had the power to really make it work. I mean, the power plant in the ship to make it work until Schauberger came along. I think he was the missing piece with his vortex technology. Once they started using his technology, they were able to power these crafts, and who knows what they did and where they went. I get very strange letters, let's put it that way, in emails to me. And
you mean when you get strange emails? What do you mean?
Claiming to be representatives from them and stuff like that.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And then they say stuff like they're all over and they control time, and it's like something out of the outer limits. We control the technology, we control the volume, we control the vertical.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. And at the end of the war, all of the girls from the Vril Society, including Maria Orsic, disappeared, right?
All of them disappeared. Everybody from the SS disappeared. Hitler disappeared. Hitler never committed suicide in a bunker. That's it. Everybody knows that. There's that skull they were showing. It all turned out to be a 27-year-old woman's skull. That it was supposedly him. That body double. If you look at that body double of that guy who's bending over, petting the kids in the last moments when the Russians were closing in on Berlin, that's not Hitler. The guy's got a flat nose. Compare his face to Hitler's pictures. That is not Hitler, whose hand is shaking behind his back. I don't know. It was a body double or something. It looked like some guy they dragged out of a concentration camp and dressed him up like Hitler. He was gone. He was long gone. Otto Skorzy said he lived out his life till 1956, I believe it was, in Argentina. He was a sick man. I mean, the guy had all kinds of wounds from World War I and blah, 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 blah. But he lived out his life peacefully in Argentina until 1956.
Yeah.
The rest of them, like Kamla, and if you go on the site, on the Cosa Nostra site, they'll tell you exactly who was really in charge of all this. Every one of them walked. I mean, the Nuremberg trials was nothing but a show. The only reason they left Goring behind is because he was a fat drug addict and he was useless. I mean, by the time they put him up on the stand, they'd cleaned him up, and I think he held off 100 lawyers at once. The guy was so smart. But when they caught him, he was hopelessly addicted to opiates, and he was 200 pounds overweight, and he really didn't know what he was doing anymore. You know, I believe that's why he got left behind.
But the brunt of the SS never found.
Every one of them walks. Some of them became billionaires. The guy who built the technology for Dorst Technologies, I think it is. He owns the largest consulting construction firm in Germany by the 60s. This is another thing they did, okay? They took their best scientists on that boat U-234. They sent the guy named Schlick over here. America only had about, I think it was 16 kilograms of actual uranium. They needed about 40 to reach critical mass and make a nuclear bomb. And it was a couple of months before they dropped it on Japan. They didn't have it. It's on record. And they weren't going to make it neither with the methods they were using. When they picked up U-234, they had a shipment of something that was in gold containers. They had heavy water, deuterium. They had the fuses, which in order to, plutonium was the new type of uranium-238. Plutonium needed to be compressed from, I think it was 64 different angles at the same time, simultaneously, with an explosion. They did not have the technology to fuse this properly. But with infrared fusing, they could. Now, this guy, Schlick, he knew how to do this. He was on U-234. He was immediately taken not even into custody. It was like they embraced him. All of a sudden, they had enough to drop that bomb on Hiroshima.
Now, was U-234, was that the ship?
The submarine,
submarine that wound up in Argentina?
No, that was a submarine that wound up in one of our ports.
Oh, okay.
I don't even know what their story is with it, but was supposed to be going to Japan. It had all the most advanced technology. This is what they tell people, by the way. This is not the true story, but it had all the most advanced technology of the Third Reich, and they were taking it to Japan because Japan wanted to continue the war, and like good allies, they were going to give them everything they had. There was 2 Japanese officers aboard the craft, and I think it ended up in Portsmouth, Maine, somewhere in Maine. And right before, it was the Coast Guard had spotted it supposedly, but I don't know how that happened. And then these 2 Japanese officers conveniently committed hara-kiri, and the boat ended up in Portsmouth, and the United States got all this technology. But they never said nothing about. They did not have the ability to make enough plutonium or uranium-238 to reach critical mass or to fuse the plutonium. None of that's ever mentioned in organized history or mainstream history. But if you look at the manifest for the ship and statements made by people, it was all on the submarine. And there was a scientist who was it was their top electromagnetic scientists, outside of the ones that they kept for themselves. They were top electromagnetic scientists they were willing to sacrifice. I believe his name was Schick or something like that. Now, he immediately was embraced by the American government. They flew him all around. He was giving lectures to all the big defense industries. And within a few months, they had figured out how to fuse plutonium properly using infrared fuses. They had figured out that they had produced enough plutonium and uranium to reach critical mass, which they'd so far short of it was pathetic. Now it's known that Germany was testing atomic bombs in 1944. They were testing them over in the Northern Islands. There's still areas of Germany that are so radioactive from those tests that you can't even walk in them. Early 1990s, they released, the NSA released it. The bad guys, the NSA, yeah. You should look at who they're telling you the bad guys are, because generally it's just the opposite of what they say. But in any case, the NSA released it, and it was from a test pilot that actually flew through this explosion in 1944. They were testing it out. I think what they did is incinerate 20,000 concentration camp people, too, from what I gather. He made a statement saying, I don't know why they did that and tested it in such a populous area. But that is in 5, that account.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because, I'm listening, and the thought that comes to my mind is that the United States used this technology in a way that they were accusing the National Socialists of wanting to use the technology.
Over and over again. I guarantee you, if a deal was made with that U-234 and what they gave them, they were supposed to use that bomb as a demo to stop Japan from waging war. Not to drop it on a city populated by civilians, but that's exactly what they did do. Eisenhower and Truman, they were everything we're told Hitler was. And Churchill, he was a lunatic. I mean, they didn't even want him around after the war ended. They got rid of him as soon as the war was over. England got rid of him. The guy was a drunk and a lunatic. Everything they accused the National Socialists of doing is what they were doing. They had a little plan called the Morgenthau Plan where they were going to starve half of Germany to death.
Right.
That was decided against. They still ended up killing about 9 million Germans of starvation. I don't know if those were Jewish people in those concentration camps. They could very well be cholera victims, victims of... The whole country was starving to death. I mean, you show me pictures of naked corpses all starved to death. Well, according to the actual facts, that was about 1/6 of the population of Germany that could be in those camps, and every prisoner of war they had taken, too. We carpet bombed cities till there was nothing but incinerated masses. That's another thing, like, people will ask, well, if they had the atomic bomb, why didn't they use it? Why didn't they use it? The whole world, they were faced against the whole world, aligned against the whole world. They had all the power of the Soviet Union and America aligned against them. They demonstrated what they could do to Germany when they bombed Dresden and a few other cities. They just incinerated them right to the ground. Even if you did have a bomb like that, it wouldn't have done you no good. They would have dropped poison gas on them. There wouldn't have been a German left walking if they had tried to use that bomb. So they weren't going to use that bomb.
Yeah, it's really, you and I spoke before we actually got on the show, and it's just one messed up world. I don't know. I'm just hoping that at some point we could turn the ship around.
And that wraps up the first segment of our discussion with columnist Jack Hart. For the second half of the interview, Jack will take us through his current article, Black Sun Rising, The Return of the Titans. In Return of the Titans, Jack takes us through the strange story of Richard Shaver, who wrote a 10,000-word manuscript titled A Warning to Future Man, which was published in the March 1945 issue of Amazing Stories magazine under the title I Remember Lemuria. The story spoke of long-forgotten advanced civilizations, including those that existed within the inner Earth. Shaver wrote that Earth was then called Mu. When the advanced civilization departed, they left behind their subterranean technology, which fell into the hands of a less advanced race, referred to by Shaver as the Dero, who used the technology to inflict pain and suffering on the planet. Although the story is considered nothing more than mere science fiction by many, Jack offers an alternative perspective. Perhaps it was all truth, cloaked in allegory. So with that backdrop, let's continue our discussion with Jack Hart.
At the end of World War II, this guy named Richard Sharp Shaver, this guy appeared. He started writing about all this technology that we're now finding out that the Germans had. He's talking about sciences that are totally alien to us. What he says is the universe is made up of disintegrants and ex-disintegrants, okay? First of all, mankind, the human race, are gods. They're as old as time itself, almost. And they've populated the entire universe. Nobody knew where they came from. This place was once called Mu. And our sun was once a planet. You were talking about Ishtar's revelations in the 13th century. That is exactly what she refers to man as the ancient travelers of the universe or something like that.
Right.
It coincides exactly with what she said. But in any case, they did not leave this planet because certain entities commandeered the means of communication. Does this sound familiar too? Every civilization, there's always going to be outcasts. It doesn't matter how utopian it is, or, there's going to be people that wander off, and that's what happened. And the surface was called Atlantis. What they had was cultivation forests, but obviously he meant cultivation for food, cultivation for... It's interesting that the rainforest, how many different medical cures does it produce? There's almost 20,000 patents. But he was calling them cultivation forests. These people wandered into the cultivation forest and lived like savages. I guess they were kind of like immortal savages, but they were savages nonetheless. Eventually, they found their way into these tunnels. Now, the original civilizations of Mu, or Earth, had grown under a sun that was completely beneficial. It burned just pure carbon. So they were like the gods. Their technology was even more advanced than what Mu had at the time. They had stuff that nobody even dreamed existed, and this was in a civilization that was already super advanced.
Did this civilization, does it go back to Lemuria and Atlantis? Is that what they're claiming?
Goes back before that.
Before Atlantis.
They were before Lemuria. These were what you would call the old ones. So the technologies they had were off the charts. But they had left it all behind because they had migrated to stars unknown. So it was sitting there dormant, abandoned in these tunnels in the center of the Earth. These savages had gradually, they'd worked their way down into these tunnels, and they'd found it. And what they found was they had machines that they call stim machines, and they were used to induce like sexual ecstasy in people and stuff like that.
Pleasure.
Pleasure, right.
Yeah.
I think they described it as every sensation was 1,000 nights of pleasure, with these rays from these machines. Now, what they started to do is use these machines to satisfy the requirements these savages had for pleasure. But they didn't know is that these machines also had filters that had to be changed periodically. And that the metals on the machine would also pick up this heavy metal, this radiation, and that had to be changed too. So eventually, it changed the beneficial effects of these rays into something that was what Shiva calls weirdly bad. And living in the close proximity to these machines that they were constantly using actually mutated their offspring into a degenerate race of dwarfs. Now, these are called DERO, for detrimental energy robots. And these dwarfs are unable to function without using these machines. And their idea of pleasure is inflicting torture and pain. I believe he said they were responsible for kidnappings all over the world, and they're responsible for all the evil that goes on in the world. From the decisions of kings and tyrants, they were the sirens that lured the Greek sailors to their deaths and smashed up on the rocks with their enticing voices. But they've always been there.
And they're subterranean dwellers.
And they're subterranean dwellings using these ray machines, as he calls them, which, he uses ray, but they were talking about waves, energy waves. But in any case, they use these things to, actually manipulate events in this world to our detriment as the surface dwellers. And they get big laughs at it. If you're walking down the street and you break your leg by tripping over a crack in the sidewalk, there's a DERO somewhere in a subterranean tunnel that's laughing about this. This is what he was saying. It struck a chord with people.
He's saying that there's an evil force that's being manipulative.
A malevolent force that actually has a consciousness.
Yeah.
A plan. And evil is working with a plan. It's not just happenstance or coincidence. It wanted to do that.
So they just stumbled upon these machines because the more advanced civilization decided that time was up. They had to go someplace else.
Right.
They left the machines here, and so these species of DERO, they started playing around with these machines and...
Right. They were playing around with the machines. They ended up becoming addicted to them.
Okay.
Like we see our kids today, pressing these buttons. You can't take that cell phone away from them. They can't think anymore, And that's how these DERO became. They needed the machines to actually function.
So they became addicted to the machines. Now, didn't Richard Shaver, it wasn't his claim that he actually spent years down in the subterranean?
He claimed 8 years in the tunnels, but if you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I want to sell you. But I believe he disappeared around 1934, turned up around 1942. What he was doing was being trained by the Abwehr on the SS. He probably went to Germany. The city he was in was only 50 miles away from where they founded the American Bund in Pennsylvania. So no doubt he was a steel mill worker, brilliant man. Somebody noticed in the Bund Society, and they sent him over to Germany for education. That's my theory.
He was making a living as a welder, right?
Right.
Right, so he just wasn't a welder and just kind of meandered around. And
Michael, his art is being shown right now in L.A., Amsterdam, New York. He's considered an artistic genius. His writings, just like, nobody even wanted to read Isaac Asimov and the other hacks around after they started reading him. I read in what the hell is it? Above Top Secret, the lunatics, they're really into all this stuff, the connoisseurs of the strange, I call them. But in any case, they compare them as a cross between L. Ron Hubbard, Charles Fort, and there was another guy, Lord Dunsay, he was called. They were three of the greatest science fiction writers who ever lived. And he was like a hybrid of all three of them. And this guy turned out book after book. You can tell by the way he writes that he's been trained in writing. Right. And not only was he trained in writing, he was trained in, he knew all about, he also exes in the forward. He tells Einstein to have a look at his work. Of course, Einstein never did, but it seemed like more or less a dare,
Yeah.
He was trained in science, he was trained in art, and he was trained in writing. Somebody trained him. Okay, I left a link. There's a book written about that too, about how the early CIA, they were all trained in literature.
So how did he come to know about the subterranean species then?
Because the Germans had the Pan-Babylonian Society. They'd already dug up half of the Middle East. After that guy Smith came out with the Epic of Gilgamesh, where he recounts the flood.
The flood, yeah, Noah's Ark. Yeah.
Word for word, 2,000 years before anybody wrote the Bible or Genesis. The Germans, they weren't about to, sit around and say, well, maybe, no, this is right, this is our religion. No, they realized the Bible was plagiarism and it was fraud. And by the way, you're always told about how the Germans hated the Jews and the Jews hated the Germans. You know what? They were financed by two of the richest Jews in Germany, too. They went into this wholesale, and they happen to have their own place called the Udersberg Mountains, which below it is a labyrinth of caverns and stuff.
Yeah.
People that go in there get lost. They show up 60 years later having not aged a bit. This is all documented stuff, Phil. It's even stranger than our Bermuda Triangle. There's been so much weird stuff that has went on there. They went down in there and they found these tablets that I talked about in the Chronicles of Akakor. These tablets that recorded. Now Richard Shaver is talking also in his narrative about how the narrator of the stories is told to write all this down in incorruptible metal tablets and secrete them somewhere in the earth where they will be found by future men. It's a warning to future men about what's going on. The Germans found these tablets. That's part of this whole thing with the Vril Society, with the Thule Society. They had these tablets. They had them from maybe since before World War I. That's part of what started this whole thing.
So Richard Shaver, he got his information then from the German.
Yes, I believe without a doubt. I don't believe for a second that he was down in those tunnels and smart.
Because that's the story. The story is that he was brought down to the tunnels by somebody.
I know. He told a lot of stories.
Okay. I just wanted to get your perspective on it. Okay.
Right, and then Palmer said he was really in a mental institution, and then legitimate researchers checked that out, and he was never in a mental institution. Nobody knows. He's totally untraceable. From 1934 to 1942, nobody knows where Richard Schaefer was. I say he was with the Abwehr in Germany, and I think my guess is better than anybody else's. I'm the only one that picked up on Sharp Shaver, so take my word for it.
Okay, all right. So he knew about this, and then he started writing about it.
They sent him over here. It was a PSYOP. Our government is half Nazi. Come on. I hate to use the word Nazi. National Socialist. They deliberately wanted to introduce this to the world. This is what really happened. Throw the Bible away. This is the history, your history as a human being. You're not from a monkey, for Christ's sakes. The British, they tripped over themselves pushing that on people. But in any case, they wanted to gradually introduce this to the world. So what they did is they got this guy. He's a great writer. We'll teach him all about science. Go over there. Call it science fiction. He even says, I have to write about it like it's fiction, but it's not. And that's exactly what he was doing.
Okay.
Okay, Palmer's another one. He was intelligence all the way.
Ray Palmer. We're talking about Ray Palmer.
Yeah, Ray Palmer. He was implicated in so many different things. The other guy, what was his name that cited the first UFOs? Kenneth Arnold. He ended up writing for Ray Palmer. They wanted to introduce this to the world. Wait, they got stopped by the usual suspects. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
I just wanted to get the audience acclimated with how did Shaver, how did he come about writing about these beings called Darrow?
In a brief summary, Palmer was the editor of a magazine, science fiction magazine called Amazing Stories.
Right.
Okay, it was wildly popular at the time. In 1942, he got sent a letter by what he thought at first was a crackpot, he says. It was talking about man tongue, which was the primal basis of all languages spoken on Earth. And he had a system, it was almost like a gematria in Kabbalah, where the letters could be used to describe each word, no matter what language it was spoken in. And he called it man tongue. Palmer originally threw this letter in the garbage. Then he starts thinking about it, and he starts looking at it. He takes it out of the garbage, starts looking at it, he says, and it works. It works. He publishes the letter in Amazing Stories, and he asks his readers to check it out. By the way, it's in Lemuria. It's in the bibliography. If any of your listeners want to check it out.
Okay.
But in any case, everybody's looking at it. It works in Chinese. It works in German. It's like 96% accurate in German. It works in every language they try it in. You got hundreds of letters. Okay, now he's excited. Where'd you get this? He writes. Okay, so now Schaefer mails him back a 10,000-word manuscript. And he calls it Warning to Future Man. And Palmer knew what he had. But he sat on it for 2 years, and he edited the hell out of it by corresponding back and forth with Schaefer, which is all, if you read I Remember Lemuria. Each chapter is indexed with the correspondence for him to elaborate on certain things he was saying and stuff. And it was published in March of 1945 when we knew the Germans were defeated for good. Okay, that's another coincidence. That's where he started writing. Okay, when it was published, Amazing Stories sold out. The circulation jumped from 135,000 to 185,000, which is an unheard of number for any magazine in that day. People from all over the world were reading this. And boom, it was instant overnight, and he just kept going for the next 2 years with it. And Shaver kept pumping out more and more stories. But originally, the best one was I Remember Lemuria. That's the pinnacle of his work. They said he filled up a 5-foot bookshelf with his writings. Okay? That's where the writings came from. Now, getting back to the Darrow.
Yes.
Okay, the Darrow in the tunnel, more or less engaging in the most extreme mental masturbation that the world ever saw, and eventually, the civilizations in Mu, they were ruled by what was called elder gods. These were immortals. They lived forever. They fed themselves like this hormonal regime of all kinds of rays, of foods, of hormones, which made them grow and grow and grow and attain more and more knowledge. And they became like gods. And they grew to 300 foot, too. These were called the elders. Eventually, one of these elders did some screwed up things, and they had to exile him. He makes his way down into the tunnels, and he finds the Darrow, and now he wants revenge. So now he organizes the Darrow, and he teaches them how to really use these machines. So now, through selective assassination, through commandeering the information dissemination channels that had things like TV, radio, newspapers, and stuff like that, they take over the entire planet. And everybody knows they're there, but nobody can really talk about them. Because if you start talking about them, they kill you. That's it. You're done.
That sounds familiar.
Doesn't it all sound familiar, Michael? I'm trying. My jaw dropped when I read this. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Then you got to consider when it's written.
Even this God, it just rings of the fallen angels.
Yeah.
You know,
well, that's what he says. That the Bible was taken from these books. Here's my theory that when the Library of Alexandria was destroyed, that these books were destroyed. In any case, he said that these books existed right up until the time of the Common Era. So it coincides perfectly with the destruction of the Libraries of Alexandria.
Okay.
And he says that the Tau Cross is also a symbol of this energy, disintegrants, ex-disintegrants, which permeates the galaxies. Okay, that's where it was taken from. So all these stories that we have are just handed down from this original story. Now, we're to the older god. He's in the tunnels. He takes over all of Mu. Now he's kidnapping regular citizens. He's kidnapping the elder gods. He's kidnapping the Titans, who are like these horned beings, who are like the allies of the human race. They're like godlike, but they're wise and immensely powerful. But he's kidnapping them all. He's raping them, he's murdering them, he's torturing them, he's got piles of women's breasts, an open-air meat market. He's having himself a good old time. And this is his revenge, I guess. And he wouldn't let them leave. They should have left Mu like thousands of years before. They should have migrated. That was the way the human race worked. But he had made it so they couldn't leave. So now, these students are sitting there. Finally, they're being trained in one of these halls of learning. And one of the instructors speaks up to them. And he tells them what's going on. When they learn of this, they know that they have to stop these Dero. So they send a giant space fleet to wage war on the Dero and free the Atlanteans and the Titans that are being held hostage on the Earth. When they get to the Earth, the elder god communicates with them, and he tells them, well, this planet is hostage. If you don't turn back now, I'll just kill everybody on the planet. But they don't turn back. They end up penetrating into the underworld, where the citadel of the elder god and all his weapons are kept. And they take this giant army down into the center of the Earth. And when they get to the citadel, a massive battle ensues, which it says that the Nor were killed by the thousands because the technology that the Dero had was better than theirs. But they just kept coming. Finally, they overwhelm. They take the city, they kill all the Dero. They spare the children, by the way, and they say they used them an experiment to populate the Dero children, to populate another planet. So hopefully that planet's really quarantined. But yeah, they find them gnawing on human bones and piles of human breasts. But in any case, they capture the elder god to learn what they can of the technology, and presumably they're going to execute him after they're done learning from him. But in any case, they all return triumphantly to the outer darkness, and the Titans and the human race, they flee the stars unknown. And as they're leaving, this mutant Mu knows that there's these savages of the forest, and they have the blood. The blood of the Titans is a big thing in this story. So they call it Ichor, the blood of the gods.
So
now,
who were the Tero then? Wasn't there the Tero?
Tero were Atlanteans and Norse who stayed behind to fight a guerrilla war against the Dero. They were introduced in later stories by Shaver.
Okay. All right. So they didn't kill all the Dero.
No. They said they didn't. They took the city, is what they did.
Yeah.
That's where the technology was. But the Dero was spread out all over the earth in all these tunnels.
And the city is in the inner earth?
There's all kinds of cities in the inner earth. The inner earth is riddled with tunnels since time began, of all different civilizations and technologies. There's more space for living in the inner earth than there is in the outer earth. That's what's said. Okay.
The Dero, are they in the center of the earth?
I think he's specific about that. It's not a few miles underneath. It's way down there.
Okay.
You know? He's very specific about that.
So, Jack, go back to the beginning just a little bit here, and we talk about, because I wasn't really clear, and I want to make sure the audience is clear, that at one time Earth was called Mu. M-U?
Yes. Mu, Pan, and Atlantis. Eventually, this Queen's Scientific Literary Society, which is an offshoot of a radically Bolshevik Futurarians. They were also from Brooklyn. They were all rabid Zionists. They got together and they decided that the world had had enough of Schaefer. He was making them insane. They enlisted the help of the YMCA. There's always their Christian dupes to help them. And they used the same techniques they used to commandeer the garment industry, because my parents were in the garment industry, so I can tell you this is what they did for organized crime. They interrupted a science fiction rally in Philadelphia, threatening people, screaming and yelling, carrying on, and they took it to the United States Postal Service and the editor and the publisher, Palmer's boss. They threatened him that they were going to have the magazine banned by the Postal Service, and he had had enough. I guess he was in fear of his life. I can tell you from the garment industry that their next step was to just, he would have got shot walking around his house.
Yeah.
And I think he knew that. So he told Palmer that's enough. So Palmer resigned, and he started his own Fate magazine. And Schaefer kept writing. He wrote a pile of books after that. But, he didn't have a major publisher behind him.
Yeah.
A major publisher makes all the difference, as you're well aware of.
Well, a lot of people can scoff at this stuff, but it's like what you and I were saying earlier. A lot of this stuff, in my view, is encoded. It's
allegorical.
Right, and it's.
I know. Well, that's what Chronicles of Quay. I immediately told my audience that it's a 13-base code. It's taken from the Kabbalah. I mean, it's obvious.
Well, and you and I said before we started the discussion, the Nazis, they didn't pursue what they pursued from an occult perspective and from a hidden knowledge perspective. They didn't spend all that money and that time and that energy just chasing their tail.
It's ludicrous the way they're portrayed on TV, like they were crazy or something. The German technology was 100 years ahead of ours. I think I wrote it in part 5. It's all there. It's all the evidence. I lay out all the evidence. They jumped us into the 21st century. Why are we scoffing at the people who gave us practically everything we use today? You can go back to an article that was printed in Harper's Weekly about what they got from the Nazis. Everything from magnetic sciences to infrared sighting systems and wireless communication. All of it was invented by the National Socialists. We have a show that presents itself as National Geographic or the Smithsonian sitting there like these people are crazy. No, if they're crazy, then we must be living in a make-believe world, right? This cell phone sitting in front of me must not be real. This computer sitting in front of me must not be real. The television that these idiots are addicted to every night, that must not be real.
You know this, when they do exposés or documentaries on Germany, they only talk about
the bad stuff.
The bad stuff.
The bad
they
stuff
only
happened in the fog of war. I think there's a saying called the fog of war, Michael. In a fight, people do, especially in a fight for your life. I mean, everybody does a lot of bad things, man.
They don't talk about the occulted knowledge, the hidden knowledge. They don't talk
about
that stuff.
That's what I said, the causes of this.
Yeah,
This is what the roots of it were. The British aristocracy didn't want anybody to know, Jewish people have kept it, their rabbis have kept it to themselves for 3,000 years. That's what the Kabbalah is all about. You're not even allowed to study the Kabbalah, most Jews. They're not allowed near it,
Yeah.
I've had good Jewish rabbis. I mean, I met that rabbi who was Jews for Christianity a couple of years before he died. When I told him I was a Kabbalist, he wouldn't let me in his house for the first hour of our conversation, He thought I was a devil worshiper, And that's the way Jews look at it, too,
Yeah.
Wow, it's Satanism. That's why I get mad when people start talking about Satan. It's not Satan. Evil is that God of the Old Testament that's always killing something. That's evil. That's evil incarnate. But in any case, I'm getting off the topic.
No problem.
And that concludes my interview with Jack Hart, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Jack's articles can be found by heading over to Veterans Today and Open Salon. I will include the links to both sites in the show notes below. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, The Sage of Quay. Also, please take a listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia, by heading over to laboroflovemusic.com. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.